Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at B2B World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at the flood situation and of course the kind of activities that are going on and the impact that this flood is going to have and is having at the moment also on the economic situation of the country. Of course, Pakistan is in a tight spot in terms of the economic situation, which has been deteriorating significantly since the start of this year. We have of course seen some sort of positive improvements coming in with regards to the IMF loan facility and also other loans and investments and the inflow, of course, from different countries as well. But the fact remains that when we talk about the situation with regards to the floods, it has also hit the economic situation of the country, with the finance minister estimating about $10 billion estimates in damages. And this, of course, is a very preliminary estimation. There needs to be a real on-ground assessment, which will then vary and change the numbers significantly. That is what is expected. We're also, of course, seeing that with regards to what has happened so far, there are many damages to the agricultural output as well, to large-scale industries and the demand of large-scale industries and their products, which may seep into small-scale manufacturers as well. And this is something that we have been seeing happening at this current moment. We've also seen that with regards to the IMF program, that was something that was negotiated and talked about before the floods hit. So there is, of course, talk of how Pakistan will be able to meet its fiscal targets as outlined in the IMF program as well. We're going to be taking a look at the way that these floods are impacting the various industries today and how the future consequences as we see it in terms of food security and of course inflation. We're going to be taking a look at that and the way that it is going to evolve, the consequences that it's going to have in the future as well. Again, when we talk about the way that the flood situation has hit, there is talk of how it's unprecedented. Of course, 1/3 of the country is underwater. We have above more than 1,000 people who've already lost their lives, with the death toll increasing day by day, and more than millions of people who are still homeless and are displaced. And this, of course, means that there is going to be a lot of resources allocated and to be given to these areas and the people, which of course means that when we take a look at the situation in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic and when it hit, it was also a major catastrophe. Of course, it was a global one that affected different parts of the world, but there were reports and questions with regards to how people around the world and the international community must come forward to help those in the developing world as well and those in need. There is talk of how the international community must step up more than just aid and charity in terms of what is going on and the rescue efforts, and also in terms of the economic situation, and whether or not that is going to happen is of course going to be part of our discussion. So that's what we're going to be taking a look in today's show. For this and more, as always, in the studios we have with us senior analyst Farooq Batafi, and we've also been joined online by Mr. Mohammed Adnan Jalil, who's an industrialist, and we've also been joined by Dr. Kaisa Bengali, who's an economist. They both joined us online. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us in the show today. I'll start with you, Dr. Kaisa Bengali. When we take a look at the economic situation, of course, in the country, we've spoken about how even prior to the floods that Pakistan was, of course, in a tough spot. It is a difficult situation for the country to be in at the moment. But when we talk about the way that the floods have affected the economy of the country and is inevitably going to affect the economic situation, do you think that we are, in terms of the way that we have assessed the situation, in terms that we have taken a look at the kind of resources and allocation that is needed, we're even close to estimating or understanding the kind of resources and uplift Pakistan is going to need, and whether or not we will be able to do this without international support, not just in terms of aid, but also in terms of debt relief?
Thank you, Sana. This is certainly a very, very unfortunate situation that we are facing. On top of a very severe economic crisis, we have this natural disaster. The economy of the country will take an additional hit. The economy of the people, the household economy, is also taking a very major hit. The loss of crops means the farmers have lost their source of income for the coming year. But a lot of the households in the villages, they store their wheat after the wheat harvest for the consumption in the months ahead, and they have lost that wheat stores as well.
Right.
And one major raw material that was standing crop is cotton. So cotton crop the destruction of the cotton crop will mean shortage for the textile industry. Uh, Other industries are reporting to be shutting down temporarily because of low demand, even if these industries are not located in the flood affected areas. And what these industries are doing, they are laying off their daily wage workers, and most of their workers are anywhere daily wage. I think these workers who are not in the flood affected areas have also lost their jobs.
Right, absolutely. When we talk about, of course, these issues, there is, of course, a lot of concern in terms of the way that it's going to impact Pakistan. Farooq, when we take a look at this particular situation, especially in terms of the IMF program, there is talk coming in that whether or not Pakistan will be able to meet its fiscal targets. Is there any chance of any reviewing of that process?
Right, Sana, that is a very important question. At this moment, the state of affairs is such that Pakistan seems to be a victim of triple whammy. On one side, we have floods which have swept away 5,000 kilometers of our roads. You can imagine what exactly is going on with the value chains, the domestic value chains. Then you have the feeble condition of economy even before this. On top of both these crises, there seems to be a global recession that is setting in. So in that state of affairs, it really seems difficult to predict what kind of revival we are looking at, whether there can be a V-shaped recovery or there is going to be something like L-shaped growth. That means that we go down and we continue on the same pace for quite some time. I think that IMF stakeholders, especially their board, their experts, are not oblivious to their realities on ground. You have seen how this situation was shaping up before the COVID crisis, and during COVID crisis they actually relaxed their demands, and in fact they came to Pakistan's aid like other countries as well. So one has to actually wait and see whether there is going to be display of similar kind of generosity. But because of what happened in Sri Lanka and then the state of affairs in Pakistan, we saw that there was a lot of back and forth, and the Prime Minister actually yesterday said this, expressed his frustration that the government of Pakistan kept on trying to convince IMF, and it took them quite some time.
Right, absolutely. You also mentioned the fact that there is a looming global recession. Can you also give us an idea of around what time can we expect it to be impacted and within Pakistan as well, and for the consequences to hit the country?
No, actually, what happens, Sana, is that when there is a recession, there is a shortage in demand. You have product costs actually go down internationally, but nobody is consuming them. What happens in Pakistan's case is that even if you manufacture more, there is not going to be enough markets to market that, right? Of course, there are circumstances, as Churchill used to say, that every crisis presents an opportunity. Once the water recedes, there is going to be massive activity of reconstruction. Thousands of houses have been swept away, roads have been swept away. That actually takes us back to the early 1900s, when the global economy was suffering in the same manner, but America actually went for New Deal. Other countries also started their programs of reconstruction, and they developed their economies really fast, including Germany, by the way. So if our international partners are going to be supporting Pakistan, we can revive our economy pretty quickly. Remember that even before this crisis, our LSM was really doing well, large-scale manufacturing. And similarly, when you talk about cement industry, because Pakistan has been investing a lot in real estate and building of houses, that was also really looking up. So that perhaps can be a boost, that can be the engine of boost in coming days.
Right. When we talk about, of course, the way that Pakistan needs the support of its international partners as well, and perhaps also the IMF, Mr. Adnan, is there any way that when we talk about, of course, the kind of help that we require, there are still question marks whether or not we're going to be able to get that, especially in terms of a review of the IMF loan facility. But when we talk about local efforts and what can be done on a national scale, what do you think can be done in terms of minimizing the impact of particularly the kind of damages and loss that Pakistan is incurring because of these floods? Mr. Adnan, can you hear me?
Hi, how are you? Thank you for having me around. This is a big irony, which is Pakistan have suffered, and I think nobody was ready for the circumstances in which we have been indulged. And the amount of money I think we'll be needing, the finance minister is talking about $10 billion, but I think it might shoot up to $20 billion. The amount of money we need, we do not have it here, and we have to be dependent either on loan or we have to get it grant. So I think it will be a catch-22. How much help are we going to get it? We are getting some help from friendly countries and from other part of the world. But will that be enough? Because we have to have a new houses, we have to build them up, we have to take 7% of the country is right now.
Right, absolutely.
Hello,
And this, of
can
course,
you hear me?
is important. Yes, carry on.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, there's a distortion in the network here, some problem nowadays. Okay, the other thing is this, that we have to realize this as a nation that we have to follow the rules. We should not have encroachment. If you go back into the hilly areas where the water comes, all the water beds have been encroached by houses, hotels, and everything. So the flow of water is not right. And then the government has to realize that, because we have a huge deposit of glaciers, and if God forbids, if this thing happens again, what will happen again? We're going to face a huge destruction. So the time has come that we need to have a construction which should be fat, which should be more secure and less damaging, and it should be far away, at least a kilometer away from the waterbed. And secondly, we have to have the encroachment has to go away, because there's a tremendous amount of encroachment when if you go to Kalam, Naran, and wherever you go. So I think this is the one problem which has happened. I think we were not expecting this thing. It just happened out of the blue. Rainfall, yes, but the melting of the glacier is also a big problem we have. And according to the climate change in Pakistan, I think Pakistan is suffering
Right,
from
and Dr. Adnan, that is of course true and
God
important,
forbid,
but when we talk about these floods also in particular, a major part of these floods of course was due to flash flooding, and of course that's a consequence of climate change, as well as you were also earlier mentioning. So it seems that Pakistan of course was still a victim of these floods, and when we talk about the kind of measures that can be taken, especially in terms of the economic impact, how do you think that the measures such as regarding encroachments can actually help in that way?
Okay, the impact should depend. If you're talking about Charsada, the impact will be comparatively less, because the houses have not been damaged to that extent. Only the water and the sand has moved into their house, and that needs a big cleaning. So if you go further up, then there's no houses. Then you need to build the houses. Then, because you have to build up, if you go further up, then you have to build the whole city. So you have to plan the whole city in such a manner that their sanitation can be looked after, and they should be protected in the future also from such kind of disaster. So I think the economic, if we're talking about economy, economy hour is already suffering ever since into existence. So I think we need to have a planning in such a manner that we should stop our other developmental projects, and we should put more concentration on the small dams. We need to have a small dam where this water should go, and we should have it for we should save this water for reservoirs, for agriculture and everything. Unfortunately, we don't have a dam. This is one problem, and we need to, the nation has to think, all the political parties should think and sit together that they should stop spending money on bridges and road and metros. And I think that we should start the small dams, starting from, I think, Kalam and all.
Absolutely,
And then
Adnan
until
Jalil
and
Saab,
unless we are not
economist after economist keeps on talking about the importance of all political parties sitting together, but it doesn't seem to be actually having an impact. Let me, with your permission, Sana, let me go to Dr. Bengali. Dr. Bengali, you have huge contributions to Pakistan's various important programs, income support program, and devolution plan as well. So if you are asked to, structure some kind of recovery plan, how to actually go about rebuilding the economy, and we know that the economy is in shambles, of course, there will be a tough part to renegotiate with the IMF and international donors as well. But when you look at the state of affairs at this moment, if you were asked to actually tailor a plan, how would you actually go about it?
I was in Sindh government. I was a member of the Sindh government in 2010 when the big floods came at that time. So I have some experience of what floods do, how did they occur, and what can be done. I think Adnan Saab is very correct. If you build a house in the way of the water, that house will be washed away, and you can't blame climate change for that. That's precisely what we have done, especially in Swat. In my own career, this is the fourth flood in Swat that I am witnessing. I was personally there in early 1990s, I think 94 probably, around that, when the floods came, and it's exactly the same manner of buildings that collapsed on the banks of the Swat River, because we built half the building on the land and half the building on the river, in violation of all building laws. We cannot continue to do that. Even in Karachi, the urban flooding is due to a lot of buildings on waterways. The water flow into the sea has been blocked. So that, of course, we'll have to revisit and clear the waterways so that these floods don't occur. But coming to your question more directly, we have to, again, 2010, I can talk about Sindh. There, we knew very clearly that what route the water takes when there are these mass floods. And infrastructure was designed to divert this water and store some of this water. But once the floods were over, everybody forgot about what needs to be done. And this is our national character. We wake up when a tragedy hits us, and then go back to sleep. I wouldn't be surprised if 4 months down the road we will not be talking of the floods anymore. I think the floods are a natural phenomena. They will occur every now and then. They have been occurring for hundreds of years. They will occur for the next 100 of years. How we adapt to the nature is important. We cannot go against nature. And the other, on top of this, the adjustment will have to come in terms of our macroeconomic and fiscal policy. We cannot just say that we have to have more foreign assistance. Our own budget has to be reoriented. Our own costs have to be cut, expenditures to divert flood relief and rehabilitation. We cannot ask the international community to fund a bill where our own wasteful expenditures are not being trimmed. So I think there are measures that need to be taken on all fronts.
Right. Given that our main topic was, or headline was actually regarding industrial growth or industrial state of affairs in view of the floods, and you have been a very strong advocate of actually rebuilding IDB, industrial development, organization, corporation. Do you think that at this moment there is any chance of rebuilding or restarting our industries very quickly?
Well, there is no choice. We may not, we don't have the option of doing it in the next few months, because in the next few months we will have to engage in relief. There will be IDPs in camps for the next 4 to 5 months. because that's how long it takes for the water to recede and for people to be able to go back to their villages. But after about 6 months or so, I think the damage to industry, particularly that has occurred from loss of cotton crop, we will have to be taken care of. I think the foreign exchange will have to be allocated for import of cotton, and some industries may have suffered flood damage itself. They will need support for repair and maintenance. But over and above, I think even before the floods, we have been talking, I think, on this program as well with you, the importance of the state taking an initiative to set up industries, just as PIDC had done in the 50s and 60s. And the same model, the state sets up these industries, get it running, and then sells it to the private sector for onward management.
Right,
because
absolutely.
the private sector has been proved to not to be investing in anything that requires more high level of capital or entrepreneurship or requires greater risk.
Absolutely. Mr. Adnan, when we take a look at the situation, what you were referring to earlier, of course, were measures on how to minimize the damage and how to be able to see that we can, if there is a certain situation, again, to be able to control the amount of damages that Pakistan is incurring. Of course, that is something that we need to look at, considering the fact that we have or have seen in the past also such situations. You also talked about the political situation and, of course, the impact of or the need of the political stability and everyone getting together for the economic situation of the country as well. However, so it seems that right now at the moment, the kind of issues that we're facing require urgent help and urgent need of action. And it seems that when we talk about such changes or such measures, they seem a bit far-reaching. They seem that they are not happening at the moment, and perhaps the direction towards them is going to take away from what is needed to be done right now. When we talk about these situations and the kind of impact that we're seeing in terms of the industry and the reduction in demand, what do you think in terms of the possible options that Pakistan has at the moment, considering we were just very close to, or there were parallels drawn with Sri Lanka in the past, then now we have the floods. Considering this factor, what realistically options are available to Pakistan if we don't have the kind of international support or the review of the IMF process? At home, what can be done?
The demand, the drop in demand is temporary. One should not use that as an excuse to slow down the economy or extract more concessions out of the government. The demand will come back. And in fact, demand will surge after the floods, because repairs of roads and irrigation facilities and houses will increase demand. So I think this reduction of demand argument is fallacious.
Okay, all right. Dr. Adnan, your take on this.
Okay, we have to look into what we are talking about. If you're talking about cars and if you're talking about capital goods, obviously the demand will go down. With the supply chain problem, there is a transportation problem. But if you're talking about the perishable product and the food and water, and the list goes on, tents, clothes, chappals, shortage in Peshawar now, and we are trying to get it from other cities also. I think the amount of donation is getting limited, and the amount of philanthropists who are working out, and I think across the country. So I think the demand of certain things have shooted up and the demand of the certain thing have gone down. But I think this is, as Banjali Sahab said, this is quite temporary, because eventually, I mean, the production is there. Thankfully, the big industrial hub in Pakistan, starting from Peshawar to Karachi, has not been damaged because of floods. So they are operating. Yes, they are having, some of the industries are having an import problem because the dollars are not they are not getting it. The international huge repayment problem, because from the last 4 months, the State Bank has not given them the money. So I think, yes, we are in catch-22, but I think once this thing gets settled, and we have to rebuild, as we have to restructure, and we have to restructure, and we have to stop the leakages.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Bengali, of course, another important aspect of the flood situation is the kind of food crisis that is also looming. There has been a huge damage to crops, to tomatoes, to onions and wheat. There is already shortage of food in certain parts of the provinces. And when we talk about food crisis at a global level as well, we were already seeing these questions being raised in the aftermath of the Ukrainian crisis. Considering this issue and the fact that it has an international component as well, what do you think can be done in terms of the way that the international food crisis can be dealt with? And then when we talk about these particular crises at home, we've seen a surge in the commodity prices already, especially in terms of the vegetables, of tomatoes and onions, and there seems to be no real regulation on these prices. What do you think can be done about that, or needs to be done in terms of making sure that, considering we're already facing such high inflation, that the people in our country are not facing even higher brunt?
And Dr. Saab, since we are talking about inflation, one question, although I don't have the numbers about employment right now in front of me, but the impression is that perhaps a lot of people have lost jobs and yet we have inflation. So are we enduring stagflation right now?
We certainly are. One point I want to make about industry is that the government will have to reduce the rate of GST in order to give industry the boost that it will need once the flood situation is out of the way, because that support to industry is required. Now, about your food matter, there reports are already coming in about starvation from isolated communities where we have not been able to evacuate people, and evacuation is not always easy. There is 6 to 8 feet of water in certain places. It's hard to reach. Even helicopters are not able to operate in these areas. So, and once the flood recedes, people have lost all their whatever they had in terms of their wheat or other foodstuffs, and there is a real danger of starvation, famine following the floods. So I think the government will have to draw up a plan to import basic items like wheat, rice, sugarcane, sugar, onions, pulses. These are few very important basic commodities that the government will have to import. And I think we must open the imports from India. This is not a time to play politics. We keep saying that internally that this is not a time to play politics, but I think this is also not a time to play regional politics. India, importing from India means lower freight costs because it is so close. And for 1 year at least, the government will have to provide this basic support. I think they've already done this. They have already provided 25,000 rupees through the Benazir Income Support Program. And I know that they are expanding this program and providing it. That support is very welcome. But I think people can have a situation where a family has the money, but don't know where to get the items from, the food items from, because it's not there, physically not there. So I think that supply chain will also have to be built up in every area of the country.
Right. Dr. Saab, I'm intrigued by your comments because regarding imports, I understand that Pakistan will have to do it. Most of the crops are gone. But yesterday, regarding sugar, yesterday Prime Minister was saying that there is pressure. He was facing pressure by the sugar industry to allow export of sugar. That would actually imply that there is plenty of sugar in this country. And he said that he was not permitting that because then the prices would go up. Do you concur? Do you agree with that impression? And regarding imports from other countries, I understand that this might be the need of hour. But do we have the kind of fiscal space? You earlier said that we might have money, but IMF is breathing down our neck, and we have actually put a stop to a lot of imports. So what happens now?
And Mr. Bengali, if you could also give a clarification, you said that when the flood situation is out of the way, what exactly do you mean by that? Because of course, when we take a look in terms of consequences, it seems we're talking years here.
the flood situation out of the way, I mean the water has receded. That would
Okay.
take, in Sindh, it would take about 4 to 5 months. After that, of course, the life has to come back to normal, economy has to start functioning normally, industries have to get back on their feet. The next sowing season would have started. So I think the infrastructure, the agricultural infrastructure will need to be rehabilitated, damage to canals and other waterworks. So that is what I meant by flood being out of the way.
Okay.
The sugar, the sugar industry has been very, very irresponsible, if I may use a very mild term, throughout Pakistan's history. They want to export because international prices are high and they want to make some money, and they will. And we have seen this. We have seen this in the past. Wheat was exported, and then the shortage was created, and the same exporters became importers and imported wheat at high prices and made a lot of money both ways. And I think this is what the sugar industry wants to do.
Okay, right. And regarding fiscal space about imports, do we have the kind of fiscal space?
We are, whatever foreign assistance we are getting is in dollars, and that's what I said at the beginning, that the dollars that we are receiving in terms of assistance for floods must be directed exclusively to import of food items and cotton. And domestically, I think fiscal space will have to be created by cutting down non-development expenditure. I've talked about this before. It's already a necessity for our economic stabilization, and it has now become urgently necessary, given the floods, that when we ask others in the world for assistance, we must cut our own expenditures wherever we can to divert this money to flood relief and rehabilitation.
Absolutely, Dr. Bengali. Mr. Adnan, when we take a look at this current situation and when we talk about the flood waters receding, what do you think are currently and what are going to be the biggest challenges that industrialists are going to face and the immediate needs that must be met for the industrialists to begin again?
Okay, the biggest problem will be the infrastructure, because most infrastructure inside Sindh, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, northern areas, Balochistan has been destroyed. So I think the logistics will be the biggest problem in these areas. So that is the one thing it will be there. And secondly is that the business community, because I represent FPCCI, and the business community is continuously gathering support financially and time, and we are very active right now throughout the country of FPCCI and all the chambers in the country. We are day and night working to rehabilitate these people as soon as possible. So I think this will be the one challenge, because some of the areas are not that damaged because of the flood, but some of the areas are totally washed out, and over there we need total canals, we need sanitation, we need housing, we need everything. I think we have to restructure our budget, because here we are talking about billions of dollars, and this year, because financially provinces do not have much money, because federal does not have enough money to pay back the NFC's amount which they owe to the provinces. So I think we all are in a crisis, financial crisis, the provinces and the federal government. So I think we have to calculate very properly the damages, and we have to spend money in the right way, so the money should not be wasted and it should be used for the development of these people.
Absolutely. Mr. Adnan, of course, you mentioned the kind of efforts that are being made to contribute towards the relief activities through all the chambers. But can you also share with us the efforts that are being made in terms of protecting or providing some sort of concessions or room to the members of the chambers, to the different industries and to the business community from the chambers in terms of course, protecting their businesses or helping them in this economic crisis, and whether or not there is a coordinated way that this is happening?
Okay, chambers are the regulatory authority. We chambers or FPCCI do not make the financial. We can recommend the provincial or the federal government, but we cannot make the economic policy. We do present them the shared budget, but I mean, I think at this very moment we all are busy in helping these people out. But I think in the matter of few days we're going to make a very comprehensive proposal to the federal government to because I mean the federal government does not have much space because we are bound by the IMF. So I think they will everything which we will ask them, they have to negotiate from IMF. So I think we will ask them. I mean, when I was the vice president of FPCCI and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, so we did make a shadow budget in which we demanded the federal government 7% GST, because there are a lot of good case studies available in this world where when the percentage has been reduced, the volume of money has been jumbled up into 3, 4, 6 times. So I think we are still having a lot of problems because the taxations are so much, especially the sale tax and then the super tax, and the list goes on and on.
Right, and
mean,
I
when
understand that in terms of the policy restrictions. My question was whether or not there is any facilitation that the chamber can provide. Also, in terms of the proposal sharing that you earlier mentioned, can you give us any details regarding what sort of proposal has been
think
formulated and what goes into making such a proposal?
Yeah, the draft has not been finalized, but I think at the FPCCI level, we at the chambers are giving our proposals to the FPCCI, because the final draft has to be drafted and presented by the FPCCI head office based in Karachi. So I think what we are asking them to give relaxation on the income tax, relax and reduce the percentage of the sale tax for at least 1 year, and because and reduce other taxes which has been implied on has, like federal excise duty, withholding tax, and I mean on some industries the super tax is there. So I think this is a time that the government has to look upon on all the taxes which
All
has
right.
been implied.
Farooq, when we take a look at these measures and options that Mr. Adnan is talking about, does Pakistan have the space to actually carry these out, considering, of course, the kind of commitments made to the IMF?
I mean, I was listening to what Adnan Saab was saying, and I was really wondering exactly the same thing. On one side, we have promised that we are going to shore up our, collections, our inflows, right? And that means already, if you have paid your electricity bill, if you have paid paid for fuel, you will know how much pressed is the common man on the street. In that situation, of course, it went without saying that the business community, because they are affluent, they will be the first to pay up more. And now it seems that we are going to actually talk about concessions there. We are going to talk about, cutting taxes. If that is the state of affairs, what exactly is going to happen? I mean, it boggles my mind earlier because we were talking about merely food imports. And at that time, I put this question to Dr. Bengali, who very kindly actually provided a solution that whatever monies come to Pakistan, first of all, it should be allocated to import of food. And I totally agree that that is a matter of survival for the common man, especially the victims who are in the flood affected areas. But what do you do when the affluent say that cut taxes? Yesterday, we were talking to another businessman, and there was a very generous declaration that they are going to contribute. The company is going to contribute 1 billion rupees. But to what, right? And then that industry is actually paying taxes. There are many industries that are falling behind. And there has been tax avoidance repeatedly. We have seen that. So what happens now is the biggest question. My humble submission, regardless of what the business community does or say, is that while manufacturing will take some time to actually pick up, because our supply chains, domestic supply chains, are badly affected. There are industries or there are exports that we can focus on. For example, IT industry, it doesn't need that kind of input. It needs human resource, right? And then you can actually create these. Actually, we have technology, incubators. We can ask our business community, especially the people who were, investing there, to double down, because then very easily you can actually start exporting at least softwares, at least some kind of services that might be able to bring in some kind of cash that might be needed. At this moment, it seems that we are only, unfortunately, looking at handouts. Eventually, we have to start earning our keep as well. So what is the quickest way possible? I think that is so. And then, of course, we can then talk to our manufacturing sector, what exactly can be done for them. But first of all, economy has to be stabilized. At this moment, I don't see that if we are going to cut taxes, we are going to get beyond, the limits that were set by IMF.
Absolutely. Mr. Bengali, when we talk about, of course, the kind of efforts and help that we require from the international community, there is, of course, the IMF program and the possibility of review. Can you also please also talk about whether or not we can actually look into it? And then when we see international partners coming up and statements being made or references being made to the COVID-19 situation and how there was talk of debt relief, we've also seen economists coming forward and talking about how the appropriate response is to unconditionally cancel the country's external debt. Is that something that the international partners will actually really consider?
I don't know what the international partners will be doing. There is a lot of statements of support from all over, and there are statements of commitment, but how much of that money will actually flow in, we don't know. There is a donor fatigue across the world. So we should not be very, very, very optimistic about a huge amount of money flowing in. It will not be like 2005, the earthquake, when we were really flooded with foreign assistance. But I think there were questions about the fiscal space. I fully support Adnan Saab's point that we have to cut taxes. I think Adnan Saab has mentioned 7% as the GST rate. We have been actually working out a rate of 5%. Which will be quite sustainable in the medium term. But the fiscal space will come out of cutting non-development expenditure, including non-combat defense expenditure. We cannot now avoid talking about defense expenditure. That has become the biggest burden around our economy's neck, and that will have to be addressed. If starvation and death across the country are not to be avoided, and let me tell you, the situation that will arise 6 months from now, if it is not addressed, is there will be massive social unrest all over. The migration that is taking place, the flooding.
Dr. Bengali, I know that this is something that you have been advocating for quite long, and it makes a lot of sense. But usually it is thought that if something has not been done over decades, it might not be done within days, right? I totally get what you are saying. But at this moment, we have made commitment that we are going to shore up our inflows. We have to ensure that there will be fiscal space created through taxes. On the other side, we are going to then cut taxes and hope that there is going to be tolerance of that, patience regarding that. Will that happen?
There were attempts to bring down the Berlin Wall for decades, but it came down overnight. This is what is going to happen. If we don't take remedial measures that we are talking about, that Adnan Saab is also talking about, then there will be a collapse, an internal collapse. Not because the IMF has not come to our aid. Even with IMF assistance or World Bank assistance or Saudi, Chinese assistance, there will be internal collapse until and unless we change our whole economic policy framework and the fiscal structure.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Kaysar Bengali, for joining us, and Mr. Mohammad Adan Jaleel for being a part of the show and talking to us regarding the economic situation and, of course, the impact that the economy is having right now in regards to the floods and in the aftermath of that, and as well as the way that the international markets have been going on, the political instability, and then, of course, various other factors that have been affecting the economy, the economic situation of the country. Of course, we can hope for better decisions coming in from both within and our external partners, and we hope that we don't see the kind of problems that the economists around the world are predicting. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you on Monday.